Hello everyone and welcome to the FilmDirt Lounge. This is my review of The Omen, released in 2006. This is the first time I'm reviewing this movie for any channel. I did not see this theatrically when it was first released. I saw it a bit later. I was a little bit apprehensive seeing this because I'm one of those people that not really in favour of remakes of classic films. I'm just not really a fan of that concept. I get it, I get why they're trying to capitalise on obviously a fantastic film and hoping to strike twice with it. But for me, when a film is great, regardless of how old it is, it doesn't really need to be remade. If anything, remake a terrible film and actually make that great. Now, we have to take into account the original. It was a great film, directed by the great Richard Donner, back in 1976. It's a long time ago. And when you re-watch that film now, as I did when I reviewed the film for this channel, you can see it's starting to show its age, but only in the model effects. Otherwise, it's very well acted, very well set up and directed and with great actors. So I did think, let's leave that film alone and maybe retell a slightly different story. Let's have the birth of the Antichrist, but have a different situation as if it did happen again. You could have had a different family and a different series of events, maybe not one in politics, and just be creative and see how that story would develop. But they chose not to do that and retread the same steps as the original. So this new 2006 version of the story stars Julia Stiles, Liev Schreiber, Farrow, Davey Thewlis, Pete Postlethwaite, Michael Gambon, and Damien is played by Seamus, Davey, Fitzpatrick. And with a little cameo by the original Damien, Harvey Stevens, and looks to be in his 40s, which gives you an idea of the passing of time since way back in 1976. So overall, a top-notch cast. Absolutely no problem with Julia Stiles or Liev Schreiber playing the parents. And all the supporting cast are all cast really well. Absolutely no problem there. As I said before, I just wish they told a different version of the story. Instead here, they've tried to go a little bit more modern, obviously much more in the way of computer generated effects, and it really does show in a couple of the death scenes in particular. There's some unnatural camera movements which I really don't like. I'd rather keep the camera static. Unless it's a real effects heavy action movie, then of course have the camera moving all the time. If it was a Michael Bay movie, then even during the dialogue scenes the camera has to move, doesn't it? There's a few cases where some of the key deaths are almost direct copies of the original version, such as the mother's death, Catherine Thorn, where she's pushed off by Damien's trike, the churchyard scene with the falling spire, the hanging at the kids' party. I think they're all a bit too similar, apart from one, which is the fate of Jennings's character, where he gets his head swiped off by the swinging sign. That was kind of the most inventive one for me. But again, we have to have the camera following the mallet as it's falling, and we're hovering around the workman above. At least in the original, we had a quick shot of the handbrake going down and then the rolling truck, and that was really it, and the camera wasn't even moving for those shots. So overall here, it's just a little bit too stylized, modernized and flashy for a horror film. Now for Father Brennan's death, I have seen the unrated extended edition, so we hold on that scene a little bit longer where he's speared, and all those shards of glass that land on him, it just looks a little bit too digital. There's a plasticky effect, and I get that it was made in 2006, so maybe CG around that time wasn't quite perfected and photoreal. So why include it? CG doesn't really age well, especially all those movies around that time. And that's the problem with a lot of movies that did embrace digital trickery a little bit too soon. We all know the original film is starting to show its age. A lot of those model effects don't look real. I think they're a hell of a lot better to look at even now than 2006 CGI. So let's just touch on the acting as well, because I've gone through what I think are the technical failings. Some of the acting here is great. There's just a few instances where I think it's slightly lacking, because they unfortunately did retell a lot of the same events of the first film. All it did was allow us to compare the two performances. Keith Jennings' monologue to Robert Thorn, and then Robert's reaction to his death, was played by Gregory Peck in the original, with a lot more horror and disgust at what he's seen, and then the realisation. You could actually see that in his performance. Now, Liev Schreiber's performance with that scene was good, but he was almost disappointed with what he'd seen. I don't think it carried the same weight that Gregory Peck gave it. But I'm not saying that Liev Schreiber is a lesser actor. I just think that could be one of many factors. It could be the direction, and possibly wanting to make the film different enough, almost to validate it in some scenes. Maybe, that's what I'm assuming. Because otherwise they did stick really close to the original, and that's unfortunate. All it did was just invite comparison. And the other differences are some visions and imagery. We get the skull head character, which I believe is probably the jackal image. And all that imagery is really scary here still. I just don't think it's all as good as we saw before. And what I was long wondering was, maybe John Moore wasn't given enough development time to really retell his own version of this story. Maybe it was a quick development time just to make sure it was released on the 6th of the 6th, 06. So at this point I'll give this a score. I have to give it 1.5 only. I just think this was almost unnecessary. We've had quite a few of these remakes now, and I feel we are going to get many more in the future. And I recall the remake of, wasn't it Psycho, that was even closer to the original than this one was. So I asked, can we just remake a really bad movie in future? One that we know has a good concept, and remake that. Or maybe it's just seen as such a huge risk to pump all that money into and maybe get a second turkey. So that brings me on to another Omen release. And at the time of recording this, in 2024, the first Omen is shortly due for release. And I am quite looking forward to that. From what we've seen from the trailer, it is going to be enough of a departure from the original film, and I'll bring a review of that movie to the channel. And in the meantime, do catch me again for another review and film chat soon. Of course, like and subscribe. It was great talking to you. All the best and take care.